Good morning. Good morning. My name is Stacy Brightman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ebell Ballet and the Wilshire Ebell Theater. Welcome. Welcome. And I would like to say on behalf of our Board of Directors, our incredible community of member volunteers, our staff, and as a proud Immaculate Heart High School alum, go Pandas! It is a great and personal joy to welcome you all here today. We are grateful and energized to gather here for a conversation that promises to be nothing less than soul-stirring. May I tell you a little bit about the Ebell? The Ebell story starts in 1894 here in Los Angeles, when a small group of bold women, some would say nasty, came together to forge a public role for themselves in the cultural, intellectual, and civic life of Los Angeles. These women could not vote. Most avenues of career or education were tightly shut against them. Yet, on that first day, they pooled their money to rent a piano. They shared music and then plans to overturn the patriarchy. Yeah, right? Music, art, imagination, and a vision for a more just and beautiful future built this institution and this campus. And then in 1927, that next generation of Ebell women built this campus and our theater to be a beacon to the city. Based on all the research I've been doing, and I'm a nerd, we have the oldest theater in the nation, built by women and still operated by women. That is a snap. The Ebell is a nonprofit that remains committed to using music, arts, education, service to forge community and help reimagine the world. We are especially proud to be here today with all of you in partnership with the Immaculate Heart Community for radical compassion with Father Greg Boyle, with Sister Suzanne Jabro, and Sister Judy Vaughan. Yes, yes. For a program rooted in justice, care, and sacred disruption. It is inspired by the kind of compassion imagination that reshapes systems and souls alike. He's going to be embarrassed that I say this. As Father Greg Boyle has reminded us, compassion isn't just about feeling the pain of others, it's about bringing that pain close enough to love it. Radical compassion demands that we move beyond empathy to action, beyond comfort to kinship. And so it is fitting that we gather today, women and allies, artists and change makers, because the work of building a better world is not quiet work. It is work that sings, that disrupts, that listens, and that loves. We want to thank Michelle Richards, the wonderful Michelle Richards, our IHC's program director, for being a wonderful leader and partner for today's program. And now it's my great honor to introduce a message, a video message from another extraordinary leader, Sherry Purcell, President and Principal Executive of the Immaculate Heart Community. Welcome, Sherry, and welcome all.
Hello, my name is Sherry Purcell. I'm the President and Principal Executive Officer of the Immaculate Heart Community. I regret that family obligations on the East Coast prevent me from being with all of you today, but I did want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the program. And given the three people who will be speaking to you, we fully expect both a memorable and an uplifting experience for you. And we could all use a dose of uplifting right now, couldn't we? If you do not know about our community, this is my chance to give you a little infomercial about us. And you can guess that from our name that our origins are with Catholicism. But if you've seen the documentary film Rebel Hearts, you will know that that all changed in the 1970s when we became a lay ecumenical community. We are no longer nuns. We do not live in convents. We call ourselves a community without walls because we live all over the continental United States, in Canada, and in England. We are men, women, gay, straight, married, single, and yes, we believe in inclusivity. We believe in putting our faith into action through justice and social justice work we do in the areas of anti-racism, justice for women, justice for the environment, justice for immigrants, refugees, and indigenous people, and justice for people who are unhoused. So please go to the ImmaculateHeartCommunity.org website to learn more about our upcoming activities and check out our new initiative called Friends of the Heart. We want everybody to be a friend of our heart. The theme of the program today is radical compassion. During ordinary times, people of faith are called on to offer compassion to others. But we are not living in ordinary times. In these days when so many are suffering and living in fear, there is a real call for radical compassion. Radical compassions for others and for ourselves. So today we have three notable faith leaders with us who will be part of the panel discussion on the topic radical compassion. I want to use this opportunity to also acknowledge Celina Alvarez, who is the Executive Director of Housing Works, who will serve as our panel moderator. We are all grateful to them for making time to speak with us and to share their deep wisdom during these trying times. And thanks to all of you who are in attendance today. Enjoy the program.
Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. I'm honored to be here with you all today. You can hear me? Okay. So I'm Michelle Richards. As was mentioned, I'm program director. I've been with Immaculate Heart for the past year. And I'm deeply grateful to the Bell, to Stacy Brightman and Meredith Dayton for their generous support and for partnering with us to bring this to you. I want to take a moment and recognize all the workers at the eBell who made sure everything was perfect. The stage, the food, the seating, the AV, Greg, who made everything come together. Thank you for all the cleaning and cooking and the setup that you did. We're grateful for your support. Next, I want to acknowledge the Immaculate Heart Community members who are here and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. Two powerful communities to making a difference in the world, sometimes quietly, sometimes not so much. Have you seen the documentary Rebel Hearts about the Immaculate Heart Community? Well, there'll be another chance to see it this summer. I'll give you details on that next. Hi over there too. So I'm delighted and privileged to introduce Celina Alvarez, our moderator, who I'm honored to be in community with. Celina has a big heart with over 31 years of experience. That's crazy. In the homeless services sector. She's been the ED at Housing Works, which was founded by Immaculate Heart, for over 17 years. Celina is an activist, innovator, and thought leader. Amongst her many accomplishments, she was appointed to the LA Leadership Table, a multi-sector effort to create a new governance structure for the city's homeless response team. Celina's frontline mind and activist heart brings real-world perspective to these circles of power, ensuring that unhoused people and those who serve them have a voice. Celina is 3 years in remission from stage 3 breast cancer. her stare down to death ignited a new spark, and she now strives to balance self-care and wellness with the demands of her work. Ms. Alvarez holds a master's degree in nonprofit management from Antioch, a bachelor's from Cal State LA, and I can't think of anyone better suited to being on the stage with our three guest speakers today. I'm honored to share this microphone and this space with everyone here today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. We are here today in the midst of elders, giants, who have poured endlessly and selflessly of themselves into others. To be with and in the presence of elders is one of the highest honors. My father introduced me to the gift of embracing yesterday's children. By day, he was a chief juvenile probation officer of one of the largest counties in West Texas. He didn't believe in incarceration or handcuffs. When he died, his ex-probationers wrote me letters about the impact he made in their life. When he wasn't working, we were visiting elders, interviewing them about their life and preserving their stories through written and oral records. The goal was to lift up the stories of the Mexican Americans from that small West Texas town whose contributions were never acknowledged and in some instances erased from the history of that community. I am so grateful to be with you here today, and I'm so excited for each of you who took time out of your day to be here and to be fed nuggets of wisdom. What a gift the Immaculate Heart Community has bestowed upon each of us in bringing these three remarkable humans together to share stories of life, love, and radical compassion. Today, we welcome three people who live and work on the front lines of the struggle to make life more humane and more possible for people who need it most. Father Greg Boyle, Sister Judy Vaughan, and Sister Suzanne Jabro. They're all homegrown. They're from this community, of this community, and in it now. On the margins is where they have built their lives around the shared mission of helping individuals who need it most. They stand with and build community of love and support for those who have been cast off and forgotten by society. As the founder of Homeboy Industries, Father Greg has reached into the lives of hundreds of former gang members to provide opportunities to escape one life and build a new one. Father Greg served as pastor of Dolores Mission Church in Boyle Heights from 1982 to 1992. At that time, it was the poorest Catholic parish in Los Angeles and had the highest concentration of gang activity. Father Greg witnessed the devastating impact of gang violence on his community during the so-called decade of death that began in the late 1980s and peaked at 1,000 gang-related killings in 1992. In the face of law enforcement tactics and criminal justice policies of suppression and mass incarceration as the means to end gang violence, he and parish and community members adopted what was a radical approach at the time. Treat gang members as human beings. They went on to found Homeboy Industries, which has provided opportunities for hundreds of former gang members to escape the streets and lead productive lives. Sister Judy Vaughan is the founding director of Alexandria House, a transitional residence and neighborhood center, supporting women and children in need since its establishment in 1996. Judy is a member of the Sisters of St. Joseph Carondelet in Los Angeles and co-parents a 26-year-old daughter. She identifies herself as an activist and is grateful daily for all the courageous and determined people in her life who have kept her faithful to the struggle for justice. Judy has lived and worked at Alexandria House since its beginning. She was also the previous director at LA House of Ruth. Sister Judy also worked for Women for Guatemala based in Chicago. All of these experiences have kept her faithful to the struggle, and she even has a tattoo to prove it. I'd also like to add that Judy is a founding board member at Housing Works, the beloved organization I call my work home for the past 17 years. Sister Suzanne Jabro supports migrants in search of a better quality of life and who have endured brutal experiences and who also pray for a chance of building a new and improved way of being in the world. Sister Suzanne is also a member of the Sisters of St. Joseph Carondelet. She is the founder and coordinator of Border Compassion, an all-volunteer nonprofit organization that provides humanitarian aid to a shelter in Mexicali for immigrant families struggling to survive. You are there to learn, she said. You are there to let them know that you care and that they are not alone. Mexicali is across the border from Calexico, about 3 hours east of San Diego, and jammed with asylum seekers. They arrive at the shelter exhausted and hungry. Many have endured months of grueling travel only to discover that crossing the border was not as easy as they had been told. Sister Jabro invites faith communities, schools, and nonprofits to participate in crossover events, to visit the shelter called Posada del Migrante, and help its residents in numerous ways. Sister Suzanne also founded Get on the Bus in 1991, a local nonprofit uniting children with their parents in prison. Get on the Bus, California is celebrating their 25th year this year. Yes. While Get on the Bus, Arizona is in its 5th year. Sister Suzanne is also proud of a special program called Women of Wisdom, founded by lifers and women serving time at Chino Prison. Father Greg Boyle, Sister Judy Vaughan, and Sister Suzanne Jabro, thank you for being here with us, right here, right now. So to start us off, La Sister Judy has a few words.
Oh, look, this is good. I know, Greg, you advise the homies not to say you're nervous, but so I read that and I thought, well, I'm just going to invite everybody and tell them at the beginning over coffee and biscuits I'm really nervous. So, and I also know from talking with Suzanne, usually in the morning of a presentation like this, I look in the mirror, she looks in the mirror and said, why did I say yes? And partly it comes out of just a huge humility, but really what's so important to me is this conversation. And at first I thought, well, I'll just do it and not invite everybody. And then I just started to invite everybody I could think of who I know have done tremendous work and demonstrate, I think, for each one of us, radical compassion And it's those witnesses and those actions that keep us going. I also thought, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to say, and I might never get this again, to thank you, Greg, for your sacred text, because if it gets fuzzy in my brain, I go to Tattoos on the Heart, and then it helps to make it a little bit clearer about what to do and how to do it. And Suzanne, I'm reading this book called Emergent Strategies, and in it, Adrienne Mari Brown talks about, unless we demonstrate joy in the work that we do, we're not going to get more people involved in justice work. And for you, always since high school, you have managed to bring joy, fun, humor to the work that you do in just incredibly difficult situations. And it's an honor to be here with you, Celina, because you exemplify for me the wisdom of ancestors. And thank you for that. But we do know that any one of you could be up here talking about radical compassion. So just to start, because this is an ongoing discussion, and even though your voice might be not heard by everybody today, what we just like you to do is to introduce yourself to the person next to you. You may have already done that. You may know them, but just to say hello, and on the count of 3 to say, you're awesome, because that's one of the words in cherished belongings that I've just thought a lot about. So this is it, okay? Know the person next to you. 1, 2, 3. You're awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
So now that we're awesomer, Webster's Dictionary defines compassion as the capacity to feel sorrow for another's suffering or misfortune. It sums it up as suffering together. My hope is that today's discussion creates a pathway to what needs to be a radical call to folks who identify as good people and who in fact are. And so are all the folks that are standing in the need of justice and compassion. So let's dive in. I want to take you back to when you were a child. Share with us how you experienced compassion as children and then later throughout life, so that at this point you come to us today concerning radical compassion. Take us down memory lane. It's always the man, huh?
Oh no, now that's a challenge.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that last time I was in this room was 57 years ago. And it was a thing that we used to call cotillion. Do you know what that is? Yeah. So I'm experiencing a little PTSD at the moment. So in as much as that was a harrowing experience in my life, I don't know, I can't remember anything. But I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers and amazing parents, and we didn't live too far from here. And so I think the community of my family was it was a great indicator of how healing happens in a world that's broken and wounded, and that somehow we're in this together, that there's no, lone rangers. It doesn't make any sense. It's that somehow healing happens in relationships. I don't know if I can point out anything in terms of compassion, because for me it's about loving, and that once you know that loving is your home, you're never homesick. And then you find out that that's the truth of who you are. And but I don't see it. So I don't see compassion so divorced from just loving people. And so it's not like identifying somebody who needs love in a particular way, I think it's about wanting that to be the air you breathe, that you breathe in the spirit that delights in your being, and then you breathe that spirit out into the world because the world could use it. And so I think that's what keeps us having a compassionate heart. It's not a thing that sort of stays up in the head and where you can kind of identify folks in need of compassion. It's about staying anchored in that love, I guess. And so I think we all had models of how to do this in the world. I mean, Suzanne and Judy both were models for me. And when I arrived in LA later on, and have been here for 40 years, after Cotillion, but we used to know each other back in the day, from juvenile hall or protesting at the federal building or all these crazy things we did when we were much younger than we are right now. So anyway, I love these two women.
I grew up very close to here also, off of Stalker and Crenshaw area. And my father was the son of immigrants. He is Lebanese, and my mother was Irish. So we were doing with integration for a long time over our lives. And I grew up as the only daughter with 4 brothers. And I always thank them for helping me feel completely comfortable working in maximum security prisons for men and women. I learned that in my home with them. We had a lot of parties, and oftentimes I'd look across the dinner table. I didn't know who was sitting across the table from me. We'd be introducing ourselves. There was a lot of fun and a lot of laughter and a lot of inviting other people to our home. And I think I learned to go in that direction of being a hostess and inviting people. And I was always doing that, inviting people to come to juvenile hall, to come to get on the bus, to come to the prison, and now to come to Mexicali. And some of you here have been there on those trips. And those crossover trips are a day to experience fun, joy. We always have a ritual of blessing. So the sacredness is always there. We have a meal, we have music, we have piñatas, and the tension of the shelter community changes radically as we become one, and the healing is happening that day, the lessening of the anxiety and the fear. I received that learning in my home. And it's not surprising then that the tagline for that program would be called Compassion Knows No Border. None of these borders matter. And it doesn't matter here either. So I'm happy to be here and remember home. When we were meeting before this, we were thinking, oh my God, it's going to be a ditto time. So this ditto to what Greg and Susanna has said. But I also wanted to add thank you to my family. Actually, my 2 sisters are here today. If I ever write a book, it's going to be Growing Up by Class. My mom came from a working poor community family, and my dad grew up in Beverly Hills, a long line of attorneys. And somehow they demonstrated over and over again the care, love, and inclusivity that has to happen. Just 3 other really quick things, because I think getting to be this age, we have a lot of stories. I'm the youngest. Anybody else here youngest in your family? So you might be able to relate to this. So I wanted to be a nun in 5th grade. And then my oldest sister, Barbara, now Sister Karen, said she wanted to be a nun. And I thought, I'm so tired of hearing me too, you're just doing what your sisters do. I thought, I'm not using any bad words. Anyway, I thought, well, I'm not being a nun. But things just didn't work out that way. And I'm so grateful for my family and for making a decision not to go to the University of San Francisco and be a nurse. I think God said, that's not good for the people. You don't want to do that. Just stick to education and other things. And so there we have it. But I do want to mention two other things very quickly. When I think about growing in compassion, I was studying at the University of Chicago in 1980 when the 4 church women were murdered in El Salvador. And I think for all of us, it took us up short to look at our lives. And I was actually with Margie Tuitt, who was a longtime Catholic social activist. And we're sitting on the shores of Lake Michigan, which if you're from the West Coast and you miss the ocean, probably Lake Michigan is about as good as it gets. And she said to me, well, Judy, what do you want to be? Do you want to be liberal or you want to be radical? And I think for those of us, I come out of the Christian tradition, for those of us who take Jesus' example seriously, there was only one answer to that. And that was very life-changing. And I ended up resigning from teaching at Mount St. Mary's University. And God bless House of Ruth, because back in the early 80s, they hired me with no experience to be the executive director. But a very important thing I did was ask my sister Chris, who's also here, who was going through or had been through a really tough time. I said, Chris, what do I need to know to do this work? And she said, really, there's two things. One, folks, come. Don't expect them to hit the ground running, because people have to breathe. They just need to feel into that safety. And the other thing you said, Chris, is, they knew I was going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Okay. The other thing you said is the more power you can give to people over their own lives, the faster the healing process is. And I think that stuck with me. So thank you for that. And then just to wrap this up, the other thing, and I loved what you said, Greg, in the end, it's all about love. Does anybody do that word thing, connections? See, people do it. Yeah, I don't do it because my sisters do it really well. There is a problem being the youngest. But when I was thinking about this, I thought if these 4 things were on that word thing, they would all come together. It's loving kindness, tender mercies, cherished belonging, and radical compassion. So if you see those ever on a word thing, put them together. It comes out to love. And I was at, and I know folks from Catholic Worker are here, and I was at your 55th anniversary of service and as a community, and you were giving out t-shirts, and I almost wore it today, but it didn't really fit right, so oh well. But it says, the only solution is love, and that's what I think we're here to unpack a little bit more today. Thank you.
It makes me think of, all you need is love. All you need is love. Love is all you need. When we think about social barriers that keep people apart, how do we promote compassion in communities when folks are struck by barrier after barrier after barrier?
This is the part we did not practice.
Don't make me call names.
I think that, the gospel this last Sunday was about Thomas, doubting Thomas, and we always talk shit about Thomas, and because for some reason people think he's kind of doesn't believe right. But Jesus enters this room where people are terrified and they're locked up. And I think the most telling thing is that Thomas isn't there. When Jesus arrives, he's out in the world. He's sort of engaging the world. And so we have to somehow leave our locked room. Otherwise, we can't have what Pope Francis used to call the culture of encounter. And Brian Stevenson talks about proximity. Somehow you have to put yourself in the proximity of folks who are in anguish and are at the border or are unhoused or gang members. So that requires a kind of intentionality where people have to leave the locked room, because that's where the joy is. It's outside, and and I think the marks of the authentic disciple really are joy and fearlessness. And you can't do that if you're locked in the room, or if you're, in our own cell, in our own self-absorption. So it does take that one step, I think, where you have to at least get in the neighborhood or the vicinity of folks whose burdens are more than they can bear and whose dignity has been denied. If you can get near them, then that's when this exquisitely mutual thing happens. It's not, you don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so that the folks there make you different. And then it's eternally replenishing. That's the secret of it, I think, is that it's where the joy is. It's not this huge burden to go to the border, because it's where the life is. It's where the joy is, and that's where we're always invited. My joy, yours. Your joy complete, and that's the hope in going to the margins, or to in the vicinity, or where people feel left out.
I could say thank you for that. I think you've hit on several of the things that I would say also. I find that when you go to the margins, border of whatever, you look back on the world differently. And the possibility of transformation is alive there. And I have been invited by other people throughout my life, to go to juvenile hall, or to go to various borders. And I remember my first day of going to juvenile hall. They're introducing me, walking around, and my mouth is open because I'd never been to a juvenile facility. And I tapped the person that was touring me, and she says, "What?" I go, "Where are all the white kids?" And that was the beginning of awareness. And then a child came up and he said, "Hey, lady, are you from the church?" And I, "Yes." He goes, "Who's this guy, Jesus Christ, everybody's talking about?" I said, "Well, I taught fourth grade. They all knew Jesus before I got there." I wasn't introducing. But, it was a shock for me to see differently at the very beginning. And I saw that happen to people, as whether they've got with the children to get on the bus, and we're in a maximum security prison, for the first time ever, and having a million questions or looking traumatized, one or the other. And so I do believe that proximity matters. It really matters. And that's why I'm so happy the next generation of students, like from Loyola or OLP, come across and see themselves and spend a day, because then we're passing this on to the next generation. And so the more we can invite and throw the net wide is really important. And right now, I think what I focus on in that crossover is that we have to change the narrative. We really have to change the narrative of all of our communities on the margins. And for the migrants, there's an understanding, they're coming, the reason they're coming here, that all these people, they want to have a better life. And okay, well, fine, but I want to say that 99.9% of the people who are asking for asylum in this country legally are running for their lives. They are running from violence and fear, and they'll wait for a year in a shelter. That's a long time in a shelter. And I think that narrative has to change on all the margins, because if you don't go, then you don't know, really. And so I see people asking questions. They say, "Is it safe for me to be in Mexico here, in Mexicali?" I I said, yes, it's safe. But have you been to have you looked online where it tells the United States or, not to go to these cities in Mexico? Yeah, I go, we're not on that list. But all the migrants that you will be meeting today, they're from those cities. So they're running for their lives. As the one mother said to me, so why are you here? And she said, well, they were taxing my business in Mexico City. And then they came back and said they wanted to tax it again. And then she said, we can't, the third time, we can't pay. And he said, they said, well, then give us your baby and we'll sell it. And she said, I left that night as she's standing in the shelter with her 6-month-old baby. Taking a breath. One of the sometimes I just think I quote everybody who has had an impact on me, but this is going to be Margie Tuitt again. And her challenge was to be open to the burden of knowing. And I just want to say thank you. I know there's folks here from Alexandria House. I know some are over there. I think one of the hardest things is answering the phone. We get about 800 calls a month from folks who are not able to invite into the house, knowing that there's not enough resources. Conservatively, 84,000 homeless folks, 11,000 shelter beds, there's just not enough. And yet those who answer the phone talk with maybe other resources. 211 will just give you a whole bunch of numbers and you need to call them and you don't know if there's space or not, and often there isn't. But I want to just do a shout out to the staff with whom I live, work, and love. Also, for what you were saying, Suzanne, in terms of awareness, Bell Hooks talks about the colonization of the mind. So I know part of my work as a white person that grew up in an economically stable family is I need to do a whole lot of unlearning. So sometimes people say, that's really something, you live and work there. And depending on their faith stance, I say, well, really, this is from my salvation. This is how I get to understand reality. This is how I come to understand how most people are struggling to survive in our current city, in our country, in the globe. And thank you to everyone in this group who reminds me of that as we do different things to work for justice together. And in terms of growing the community, every Tuesday night at Alexandria House, we have a house meeting. And I've lived with, at one time, there were 18 first languages in the circle of women for whom we were going to have a house meeting. But then I really know I'm monolingual and my Spanish is horrible, but most people know 2 or 3 languages. So everybody was translating for everybody else. But the hope of these meetings and the support group is that women have an aha experience, because folks come into the Alexandria House often carrying the same kinds of stereotypes that are put forth so that folks don't understand that we need to come together. The power of proximity is not only how we change our lives, how we become more aware, but how we grow a stronger network and movement together. And I have watched women who come in with those same stereotypes share stories, do dishes together, look for jobs together, and come to respect and understand each other in terms of ways that really are fearless. And for that, I am always extremely grateful. And if you're not able to live on the margins for whatever reason, there's plenty of ways to connect and be there. And I'm going to put in a plug. We have a speakers bureau for women who are at a point in their journey where they're able to tell their own stories and to they do it because they don't want what happened to them to happen to anybody else. And they also want to break through those stereotypes. And often folks have not had an experience of meeting with someone who had to deal with human trafficking, or the possibilities right now of deportation is terrifying. It's like there are ways that all of us can stay in proximity. And that's the challenge for me, to unlearn things that are not true and to really come to deepen an understanding of the realities of most people who are struggling to survive. And that's not only for those, it's for all of us. It's for all of us to keep growing and understanding how we're connected together.
I want to branch into just a thought that struck me. Each of you are speaking to proximity. And that is something in the work that I do in the service of serving the unhoused folks. COVID changed the landscape. How do we do that? I know how I want us to do it. How do we, in this ever-changing society that has forever changed as a result of COVID, a digitized society, how do we stay close?
I just want to say, come for dinner. But I think COVID was definitely a challenge. But what was amazing to watch is the outpouring of support. And, we worked with Housing Works and Hollywood Food Coalition. There may be somebody from there here, other not-for-profits, and started, and I look at Pastor Smarts right here. They helped us do this to provide not just meals for maybe 60, but more than 1,800 through a network. So how do we do it? We come together and recognize the challenges of the time. So I think collaboration, community, but it's being willing to take a step. And what is reassuring for me in terms of this notion of radical compassion is that it is a process. It's not there or not there. If part of it is being non-judgmental, then how do I stop myself? How do we as a group stop each other from judging and making assumptions about people we don't even know what their stories are? How do we stop that? How do we support each other in growing? And I didn't know what you thought about saints and sinners, Greg, but one of my favorite gospel songs is from Donnie McClurkin. A saint is just a sinner who falls down and gets up. So how do we help people get up? And trust me, I think one of the things at Alexandria House, we have a very diverse staff, and I learned something I can swear every day about what I've done well, but what I can do better. And I am just extremely grateful for that. I don't know if I answered your question on that.
That's perfect.
But anyway, next.
Okay, I'm going to say something that I'm not sure if this is on your track or not, but my favorite scripture passage is the gift you have received, give as gift. And with the Corondelettes, it sort of fits that we received our gifts for a world standing in need. And that love of God and neighbor without distinction. That's who I am steeped in, those values. But I have an admission, and I thought that I would share it today with this intimate group of friends, right? I have been very distressed for the last 100 days. Overly distressed. And I find myself going to the boxing ring often and using bad language. I mean, I'm just overwhelmed because immigrants are on the television and in the news every single day. And when I see the cruelty, the depersonalization, dehumanization, I get overwhelmed because I feel I know the names of my people, and I really feel upset and distressed, and I had to address it because to be hiding under your bed, go through stages, hiding under your bed. Also feeling very angry. And that drains energy out of me. And maybe that does you too, that you feel off center, really off center. So I had to really address it for myself and really steep myself in all the values Judy and Greg have been mentioning about love, community, relationship, belonging, and grounded in the sacred values that I've been living my life with, because these others are, it's like evil finding a home in the leadership and the whole. I have to really be intentional about caring about the values that I feel are critically important for me to live, and that I want others to live, so that they dignity, that community, not isolation, and that the dignity and respect of human people matters. And so I'm really working intentionally to do that for myself. And I have found that I do best if I'm with people like today, where we're gathered with one another, where this group of people really share the values that I thought that the United States, that was who we were. But I'm finding out that's not really true. And so I think today is a sacred invitation to me, to be here, and all of you and all of us to be at the table, because we need to be at the table together. And also, I think of that quote, I place before you life and death. Choose life. And lastly, I realize that there are really two doors. And one is to go out into the world, right? But there's another door interiorly that I need to sojourn in, and there is no map. But I need to go there to listen to the dreams and to listen to the surprises and the graces for my next step, because I don't know. And I've been doing that, and it's been very helpful. So I wanted to share that today, because I know many of you, and we are working to heal a community in need, and that know that we belong together. We are not to be separated. So.
Yeah, I was went to one of those marches. I think it was early April, and I was in Elysian, or not Elysian Park. No, what's the meeting place in downtown LA? Anyway,
Pershing Square?
Yeah, Pershing Square. So I was at Pershing Square, and there was kind of a joy there. Oddly, we were all kind of on the same page. I remember seeing a woman in her 80s, little tiny thing, and she was holding a sign, and the sign said, "Science, bitches." Which I just loved, it was science, comma, bitches, and I thought, yeah, why not, and so, but I at Homeboy we embrace two principles. One, everybody's unshakably good, no exceptions. And we belong to each other, no exceptions. And I think if we embrace those two things, we could address everything. The problem comes is when it's an us and them, no matter who the them is. God doesn't see them, period, ever. And so even as Jesus is like, going to have dinner in Levi's house, and the Pharisees are grumbling, all they see is sinner. But Jesus sees, health. That's when he does the thing about doctors are for people who aren't that well. So the other night in Michigan, in the rally, they showed a video clip. Do you remember this? And it was a video clip of, footage we've all seen, and of folks being deported and then heads shaved and marched and chained and tattoos. We've all seen the footage. And people clapped, and they thought that was strength. And so my point of view here is, who are those people? They're not deplorables, because demonizing is the opposite of who God is. But you could not make the case that anybody who claps at a human being in a cage and thinks it's strength could be a healthy person. And so it's not about sin or evil. It's about how do we walk each other home to health. And so that I don't have to demonize Donald Trump. I can, and you don't have to be a psychiatrist to know that he's ill, but you do have to be well to know that he isn't. And so it's important to kind of walk each other home to health and wholeness. And I will be your retribution. Well, retribution is not the endeavor of a healthy adult, ever. And I remember Newt Gingrich said shortly thereafter, yeah, but wanting payback is human. It might be, but you couldn't make the case that it's healthy. So if we talk about health, I think it's better than sin and evil, because then there is no them. It's just all of us. None of us are well until all of us are well, and we're all on a continuum of health. There was a New York Times article, Governor Shapiro talking about having been firebombed and a Molotov cocktail thrown into his home. And the title was something about moral clarity. I don't think that's that helpful, because there were 700 cases of arson in Philadelphia last year. How many of those 700 are rational, healthy, whole, well human beings? I'm going to guess zero. A healthy human being doesn't do this. So when we start to talk about morality, the moral quest has never kept us moral. It's only kept us from each other. So if we change the narrative and just say, how do we help each other move towards health? And the last thing I'll say is, Vivek Murthy, who was just a hero of mine, who was the Surgeon General, and he said that mental health is the defining health issue of our time. And I think he's right. How do we know that? And I think it was exacerbated by COVID, but how do we know that? Hate crimes are up 350%. That doesn't mean people are badder than they've ever been. It's just we are not well. 77 million people, I think, voted against their own interests in this last election. That's because we're not well. How could you be a veteran and vote for somebody who called you a loser and a sucker? How could you be African American and vote for a racist, or a woman and vote for a misogynist? These aren't bad people. We're just not well. 6 million people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 stayed home. That kind of lethargy says, oh, we're not that well. 90 million people who can vote, were eligible to vote, didn't. That doesn't mean, oh, well, the politicians are, no, we're not as whole as we could be. And I think if we change our lens, and people will say the cruelty is the point. No, the cruelty points to the fact that we're not as whole and well and healthy as we could be. And on any given day, all of us, you can say, boy, that wasn't as healthy a response as I would have hoped. How do we help each other move into the health of discovering your true self and loving, which is the healthiest place to be?
I hear what you're saying, Susanna, about trying to deal with the impact of current executive orders on the people that we've grown to love and serve, and how we just strengthen our work to change policies and practices. But I had one other story I wanted to share for myself. When I was working in Chicago, I worked with an organization that was multicultural, and we started to do anti-racism workshops across the country. And I remember before doing the first one, I was doing it with Terry Hamilton, who is African American, and Yolanda Tarango, who she identified herself as Hispanic, started the Mujerista theology. And I said to her, I'm really afraid to say anything. I'm going to say something racist because I'm white. And Terry said to me, and I remember it to this day, she said, of course you are, Judy, but you're just coming from the stupid place. And, but it gave me pause because we all, for whatever is keeping us othering rather than cherish belonging, whatever that is, we need to have help sometimes understanding that and growing together. It's why I love working at Alexandria House, because of the diversity. And, it takes a lot to be able to say to somebody, you're coming from the stupid place. So that said a lot to me about Terry and my relationship. I thought, well, that's pretty good. But it's also the humility to hear it. And I do believe we're all offered a chance to understand that unconditional love that is God, and that there's nothing that's going to separate us from that love of God. And just recently I was at a CLU meeting, and Sithy Vin, who just was granted pardon by Gavin Newsom, is that right? Yeah, the governor. Yeah. Anyway, he said this thing that just so struck me. It's like, love flooded my life that fueled my ability to love others. And I wrote it down. I said, okay, if I don't say anything else today, I want to quote him because he was under the threat of self-deportation. And because of his pardon, it's not solved, but at least he's at a different place. But love flooded his life. How do we flood people's lives so then we're free to fuel love of others? So,
Father Greg, you mentioned Vivek Murthy, one of my favorite people. And he speaks to isolation being a public health issue. Edge walkers are people who walk between worlds and build bridges between different worldviews. They stand with one foot in the present reality and another foot in the future. Edge walkers are committed to making a positive difference in the world by using their full human potential. Over the course of your lives, and more so presently, how do you recover from each encounter with our human capacity for mean-heartedness and cruelty to one another, to children, to mothers, families, nature, and the world? And when and how did you begin to engage with the indifference of those hearts who claim the gospel as their spiritual home and yet justify the injustices of our current world?
thanks,
Dun,
Celina.
dun, dun.
Greg. I was going to say something. But no.
I distinctly heard you say Suzanne, and then you said everything you said after that.
I'm going to get it started and go quick, and then I'm going to give it to Greg and Suzanne. The first thing that comes to mind is I go home. And where I go home is the Alexandria House. And what I witness there is the struggle to build community among women who come from such different backgrounds, but have the courage and the need to come together and help create a better lives, especially for their kids, but also for themselves. And then I go home. I go to the 55th anniversary of Catholic Worker. I see Catherine. She inspires me. They're dancing, they're singing, they're finding joy, even though every day they're also on the front line. I go home. I participate with the Poor People's Campaign. One of their pillars is reclaiming Christian nationalism and putting forth a God that I do not recognize. And know, especially working with some women coming out of DV, sometimes it's a God that keeps them in a very bad situation because they're being condemned if they leave the very person that's beating them up. So I go home. I go home. I go to my family. I go home. And many of the folks are, I love living in Alexandria House. That's why, but I also appreciate my family, the communities I work with, the people I've met, the challenges I receive. Thank you to the Board Center for trying to put forth a shared effort of reclaiming this notion of who, whatever name you use, but being Christian, I'll use God is for us. That is unconditional love. So.
Well, I thought about this story ever since Michelle called to ask me if I would speak today, and I don't know why it keeps coming up, but I'm going to share it with you right now. Maybe someone here needs to hear this. I learned a great deal from it, and I'm going to tell the story about Jerry, a man who was serving life at the maximum security prison in Washington State, where I was the Catholic chaplain at Monroe Prison. And it was one of those old prisons where they have that great big chapel. It looks like a cathedral inside. And Jerry wanted to be baptized because he wanted to be buried next to his mother. I told him they didn't. Anyway, so I said, okay. So we have these classes, and then he comes with this distress. I killed the man that raped my wife, and I'm not sorry. So I don't feel that I can be baptized. So Jerry and I have this long talk, and it went nowhere because the next day he wanted to talk to someone else, and then he wanted to talk to one of the other nuns that was there. And then every class that they had in preparation went to that question. So finally I said, Jerry, there's a priest coming tonight. I don't know who he is. He's never been here before. All I knew is that he was young and he was not well. He had cancer. And I said, I'm going to have you talk to him. All right, I'm going to ask if he'll see you. He goes, great, fine. So here we are. Mass is over. The priest is in the back. He is not well, about 35 years old. And Jerry is a public sinner. So he is there with three other men and myself. And I said, well, Jerry has a question to ask you. So we all wait. And he raises the issue. I killed the man that raped my wife, and I'm not sorry, and I don't think I should be baptized. I can be baptized. There's this priest is very quiet, head down, waits, and then he says, well, Jerry, this act of violence must have you have some sorrow within you. And he said, yes, I'm sorry I wasn't home to raise my boys. My wife divorced me, and I went to prison. Then there's this long pause. Jerry, I want you to bring your imperfect sorrow to God and let God transform it. I cannot tell you the joy and new life that came on Jerry's face. He named it. It was, I have imperfect sorrow. It's beyond me. I can't do it. And I was like a person witnessing in a gospel story. And Jerry was baptized and asked if that priest would come, which he did. I think the whole prison was there. Jerry was very popular. And and really didn't want to miss this. So everyone was there. And he asked me to be his godmother, which was like, okay, So, what was I going to get him? I go, we've done enough. I think I've done enough. So it was a huge experience. But it caused me to think we think we're so great at being able to do and forgive and accept. And there's times when we really find it hard within ourselves and we have to turn it over. We have to turn it over like Jerry did. And just as a side to tell you, the priest died within several months. And I decided I needed to go to the funeral. And I didn't know him really, but I just felt like I had witnessed something with him that was profound. So I sat way in the back on the side. And his best friend gave the homily. And he says he told the story. His last story was his last visit to the prison. And he told the story of the encounter with Jerry. I couldn't believe it. And then he says that he shared with the community he had never heard himself say that out of his mouth. Bring your imperfect sorrow to God and let God transform it. And anyway, it was powerful and shocking to me, but it was beautiful. And then he said, and now I'd like to read the letter Jerry wrote to Father Mike's family and parents about what he had done for him. So it's a powerful reality for me, and I don't know who needs to hear that here today that kept coming up, but I think maybe all of us is that sometimes we think we're able to do more than we can and that we need to turn it over. We're not alone. We are together and with the Sacred One. So I feel confident in that, and I always remember Jerry. May he rest in peace, and proud to be his godmother.
Of the many things I've learned from the Sisters of Carondelet is an expression you use, if I'm not mistaken, is the dear neighbor. And so it's not just neighbor, because in the gospel it's love your neighbor as yourself, but it's the dear neighbor. And I've always loved that because it's intimate, it's close. Somebody said once, love your neighbor as yourself, but we don't love ourselves that well. And they said, love your neighbor as you love your kid, as you love your child. Well, now we're talking about something larger because we tend to settle as human beings. We settle for a partial God when we should hold out for a more spacious one. We settle for piety instead of holding out for holiness. We settle for a lot of things, and only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. So how do we get to a place where we see as God sees so that we can be anchored in the things that matter? Inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. And so I had a homie say to me once, I just don't like this forgiveness thing. It's too back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I just like forth. And then he said, fourth is mercy. And then he said, mercy is God. Well, that's the whole nine yadas, as we say in Spanish. That elevates us to a place that's really large and expansive and spacious. It's mercy. And that changes everything. So you were talking about behavior. We always get tripped up by behavior. And I've learned from the homies, behavior is a language. What language is it speaking? Like yesterday we had some, people were fighting. It happens, But what language is this moment speaking, And it's about real hardship or his mom is dying of pancreatic cancer, or his lady just left him. These aren't excuses, but there are ways of getting to comprehension. How do you get underneath? The homies always talk about find the thorn underneath, rather than off with their heads. How dare you fight in our reception area at Hoboy Industries. And so you want to get underneath things, because this is how God sees. It's all fourth. It's all the father running down the road because his kid came back and he thought he was dead, and he kisses him and he hugs him and he's sobbing, and he doesn't care what the kid had done. He's back. That's all he cares about. Fourth. That's just fourth. That's just mercy. That will elevate our resistance, which is required of us at the moment. Not just to point things out, point the way. Not just to indict, but invite. Invite people to wholeness and to real community. And we're in this together. And we're dealing with things that we've never had to deal with. Teenagers being hypnotized by their cell phones or locked in their room staring into a computer. Or I've buried more kids who have died from fentanyl overdoses in the last 5 years than gang-related homicides. Suicides are up. All these things are indicators that are telling us, that how do we invite people to the joy there is in community? How do we invite people to love the dear neighbor and somehow have that, engage your heart in a way that you've never known? So I hope the narrative changes, because the us and them narrative is what only widens the divide. And shaking our fist at anything, how has that been working for us? Not that well. How do we invite people to something that's really engaging for human beings to see and go? Homeboy does what it does and helps in however it helps. But it's the front porch of the house everybody wants to live in, where enemies, people used to shoot at each other, are making croissants together, And that's just a symbol. You go, oh, I bet we could do that. And then all of a sudden we're being elevated by forth, by mercy, by a spacious, larger love than what keeps us divided. I don't think that we're so much in tribes and each of us hold a view. I think we're being held by an anguish. And how do we soothe each other? But as much as the people clapping at footage of human beings in a cage, as anybody else, how do we soothe our collective anguish so that we can lock arms and create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it?
So, with so many people hurting and so many issues demanding our attention, how do we determine where to put forth our efforts first? Forth? We go forth.
I think this is a struggle for everyone at this time, because there's such a big shift that's going on for all of us in the world, actually. I like the statement, mend the part of the world that is within your reach. And Margaret Wheatley is one of my heroines, and she always says, and I agree, we have to find our island of sanity. Where are we going to contribute? Not to do everything, but to say, well, this is where I'm called. I'm the matriarch of my family now, so my family needs some attention from me that I need to attend to them. Or right now, I'm in the Mexicali border area. Right now, I need a support with the nuns that are on the border on both sides of the border in San Diego and Mexico. I need to be at the table with them. And so for me, I find that finding the island of sanity that situates me is really helpful. The second thing is I really had an awakening to the injustice, the depth of the injustice when Cardinal McElroy had a event at in San Diego at Our Lady of Guadalupe parish, and there were 1,500 people that were going to have this prayer service about the situation with immigrants, and then we were going to walk together to the federal building. I decided to drive, I live in Palm Desert, but I decided to drive down and be a part of that. I found a need. And in attending that, I felt like I had been washed over, and I was at a banquet table with real food, finally, and it was amazing. And he's got a gift, for sure, and this was his last act. But he's very soft-spoken, but he had this mantra: we must not be silent. We must not be silent. We must not be silent. And we need to show up, stand up, and act. And I really thought, yep, that's what we need to do. So when you refer to the other march down in LA and watch on television as people are gathering all over, I realize now I don't normally make a lot of phone calls or write a lot of letters or sign on letters, but I am doing it more and more, and I feel that I have to stand up for the values that I really hold and cherish. So I wanted to share that with you because we cannot be silent. We cannot be silent. So we need to find our prophetic voice.
Amen to that. Thanks, Suzanne. I think for me, I remember something an Indigenous woman said, Marilyn James, that we need to work on issues that stick like a washcloth in your throat. And I think it's a really dramatic image that calls us and gives us some sense of direction. This is one of the answers I wanted to give, because did anybody see Wicked? A lot of people saw Wicked, right? Has anybody seen the play? Okay, so there's a song in that play, it's called For Good, and Glenda and Elphaba are singing it to each other, and it starts out, people say folks come into our lives for a reason, because they teach us what we need to learn, and if we're lucky, we're also able to do it relationally. We learn from each other. And I really think that's true. And it's I love Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's being mindful of the moment and seeing messages that come in terms to give some direction for the work. It was not an incident. It was not lucky. In some ways it was. That on the hottest day in Chicago, and I wanted to get back home, and Judy Molosky said, do you know Immaculate Heart Community has a house they want used on Alexandria Avenue? And I thought, I want to go home. So that's because nobody thought anything was happening west of the Mississippi in terms of systemic change work. And I'm a third generation LA person and love the city. For me, it's really discerning, hearing what may be next. Unlike Glenda, I really do believe that people come into our lives for a reason. The books we pick up, the people we talk to, who gets to write the narrative of their own story, who we listen to, where we place ourselves, how we make those decisions. But I think it's also true for the house, and maybe this is a leap of faith. I think We get 800 calls a month from folks we're not able to invite into the house. I think the people who are there, I definitely know I can learn from them, and hopefully we're together modeling another way of being that we can learn from each other. So I just really believe that. And the other thing is there's so much to do. There's so many issues. It's everything you said, Celina. And I love the notion of intersectionality, that are challenged to see how it's all related and bringing about wholeness in our relationships, in structures and systems and communities and organizations globally. And I don't have to do that work all by myself. But what is my part? Lauren Isley has this book called The Immense Journey, and this, life and love is what it's about, but it's my moment in time right now. Each one of us has our moment in time to make sure we're adding love into the universe, and where can I do that? And that's just a really important thing for me. And I love collaboration, because I know I can call Housing Works. I know I can call Gabard Center. We have folks at our house who've been through Homeboys. It's like we have folks who go to the border. So it's really building those relationships and modeling that, no, we can't do this alone. And especially since we're open, to what may be next. But collaboration, intersectionality, watch for the signs, and know we learn from each other where we should be.
If I must. St. Ignatius of Loyola, in a meditation called The Two Standards, it says, see Jesus standing in the lowly place. And I always love it because it's not Jesus pointing at the lowly place and saying, get your ass over to the lowly place. It's just see Jesus standing there. And that's it. And then it's evocative, because you go, why is he standing there? And maybe I should stand there. And maybe he's finding something there. And so then you do what you can do. The Beatitudes says, blessed are the single-hearted and merciful, and those who work for peace. And the original language isn't blessed. It's you're in the right place if you're single-hearted. You're in the right place if you're working for peace. You're in the right place if you're at the border. You're in the right place if you're at Alexandria House, and if you support the unhoused and people who carry more burdens than anybody else do. You're in the right place. So it's not a spirituality, it's a geography. It tells you where to stand. And I think that's kind of important, because we get too overwhelmed. And this is an overwhelming moment. In my 71 years of living, I've never seen anything like it. And do what you're doing. Just put one loving foot in front of the next. That's all you can do anyway. And then you're inviting people to stand in the lowly place, to stand at the margins so that they erase, to imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And then you invite people to dismantle the barriers that exclude. You don't wag your finger at somebody because they're not doing it. You just go ahead and do it. And that is so compelling, because there is a holy longing out there where people are looking to you to show them the way. They want to respond to an invitation, because the indictment and the shaking of our fist at anybody or just pointing stuff out is not very compelling. But if we can find our collective voice and not be silent, and engage in an invitation to life and fullness and joy and community, I think people are going to follow that. They're going to want that. And but it's, so you do the small thing with great love, which is essential.
Compassion is often defined as a tender response to another's distress. It can also be an act of self-love. How can we practice acts of self-love?
Well, this is one I really love. Actually, a long time ago in another life, I did a dissertation, and um, it was on the notion of sociality. And it was a long time ago, but I was one of 50 people studying social ethics at the University of Chicago. I was the only woman there. And I made a commitment to myself that I was going to have more women theorists, ethicists than men in my bibliography. And there was only Ann Carr was the only woman faculty at the entire University of Chicago's Divinity School. Baltimore Catechism. Anybody besides myself remember Baltimore Catechism? Yeah, thank you. The mystical body of Christ. It's like, it's not just an image, it's a reality of oneness and wholeness, cherished belonging. We belong to each other. We are each other. At the core of our beings, we are one with each other. So when I think about self-love, it's like in loving others, it's also loving myself. And it comes together. It comes together for me. That's not to say for me, we talk about radical compassion, and Joyce Rupp talks about it being non-judgmental, forgiving, nonviolent, and mindful. Do we do that with ourselves? I can tell you that there's a chance I will walk out of this room and say, "Oh my God, Judy, you said nothing. You knew you couldn't do this. What were you up there for?" It's like, stop. We have a moment. We have this moment, and we do the best we can. And that's loving myself. The other thing is, that's Pastor Sabakila, and she is one of my prayer warriors, and thank you. The other thing is, it's really, people sometimes say, "Oh, wow, that's really something, you live at the house, blah, blah, blah." But what I know is it's self-love for me to be there. I was talking to a donor one time, and they made that kind of comment, and I had a really bad cold. And I thought, "No, you don't understand. I've gotten 3 different chicken soups. I've gotten 2 natural home remedies from different countries." It's the love goes out, but it comes in, and it's self-love to be at Alexandria House. And hopefully as Sissy said, hopefully I'm flooding others with love. And that's what I think we try to do as a staff. And just because this is totally unrelated, but I love what you said, and it's in your book, about being curious. So it's also stopping. It's stopping ourselves when we're going to be judgmental and going to that curiosity. And I know I saw the 25-minute sign, so I'm going to wrap this up. But, one of my favorite stories is Kiana K. We had bed bugs. Have you ever had bed bugs? Trust me, it is no fun. And we had to actually move out to Mount St. Mary's so they could tent it. And everybody got black bags to pack up their stuff. We were packing up our stuff, and Kiana K could not pack up her stuff. And so now we have them coming the next day, and her room is still full. And I had presence of mind to say, out of curiosity, "Can you help me understand, what's going on?" And there was enough respect and I think trust to share. "Judy, I've been in so many foster care homes, and every time I got moved, they gave me a black bag. I just can't pack it because I think I'm not coming home." Thank God for your curiosity. Ask the questions. And so we got suitcases. It made a huge difference. And then weeks later, Tiffany Haddish, who is a comic who was also in foster care, did a whole benefit to get suitcases to give to kids in foster care that are needing to move. And I thought, look, one time we were ahead of our times. We actually did a solution that worked. And so we all moved. Curiosity, not being judgmental, being forgiving to ourselves, but doing it for ourselves, but doing it for others. And I love what you say, Greg, that it's we're healing together. We're healing together. And in a lot of ways, my salvation is your salvation and every other person who is creating life and love in this universe. So that's next.
Well, on let's see, it was May 13th, the Sisters of St. Joseph sponsor the mission in Mexicali, Mexico, and we are celebrating Mother's Day at the shelter. And this is my appeal to you today. It's my appeal that I gave last Sunday at our church. So it is that for this Mother's Day, we are inviting you to make a contribution in the name of your mother to help a mother in a shelter in Mexicali, Mexico, so that we can give each one of the women at $50 as a gift, which is a lot of money for them. And so that's the appeal. And today I have I have a Border Compassion t-shirts in the back. They're free for everyone to take one. I wanted to say that last Sunday I went before Mass. We have this great retired priest that's wonderful, and I went in the back and I said, "We're going to do the appeal today." He goes, "Okay." I go, "You have to say a few words. Here's the flyer." So he comes out at the end of Mass and goes, "Sister Suzanne and Sister Phyllis are at the back of the church," and it's a very small little mission. And I just called upon my mother, and she told me, cut them a check. And then she said, and double it. And if you don't, I will kick you in the you-know-where. And everybody was laughing and laughing, and then they all came out and threw all their money in the basket. But it was a way to throw the net wide. And I think the sense of both of us is we have ways that we invite other people to cross a border, and in a way that they do, any way that they can, so that when we go down to the border to celebrate, it's not just us, it's the community on this side of the border helping here. There is no border with compassion. It is radical. So whatever else, take your t-shirt for today. So thank you. In the back.
So the future. As we bring this to a close, what nuggets would you like to share with our folks here today about the future going forth?
Does that mean I'm going to answer this and then I'm done? Okay. So, one is, I love this quote, and it's from Guatemala Walker. There is no road. The road is made by walking. I think if we ever needed a time to be courageous, explore new ways of working in community, new ways of doing radical economics, now's the time. But really, the nugget, talk about people coming to your lives for a reason. So at 50, I became the proud mother of a 4-day-old little girl. Her name was Renisha. She came through me. It's her own story. But I ended up being the oldest person at Chuck E. Cheese. And I did let my community know. But now she's 26. And I'm so proud of her.
And I told her I was doing this thing on radical compassion, and she said she needed to know what radical meant. So we had a little bit of conversation about that. But the story I want to tell and end with, because people come into our lives for a reason. When she turned 18, it was her birthday and she got a tattoo. Now, we have gotten several tattoos together, partly because I was tired of hearing people say anything about folks who had tattoos and in a negative pejorative, is that a word? Pejorative way. So then I could just say, oh, well, really, I have one. And that stops the conversation. But to get back to Ray. So she called me, she said, Mom, guess what you got me for my birthday? And it was like, okay. She said, you got me a tattoo. And so I took a deep breath, and it's that curiosity, Greg, that you were talking about. I had presence of mind to say, oh, can you tell me what you got? And she said, Mom, I got DNA does not make a family, love does. And so if I'm going to leave any nugget with you, it's like, we're family. And love makes it that. Love makes it community. And as much as we have good days and bad days, and probably a border compassion and homeboys, I know at Alexandria House is a commitment of those of us who live and work there to be a community, to be there for each other, to demonstrate there's ways to people to love each other when they're so totally thinking that they may be different from each other, and to be a place to come home to after doing resistance work when you wonder sometimes, are we making any change? So I guess that's my final nugget is DNA does not make a family. Love does. And we are family. And we belong to each other. And there are no borders. And how are we going to keep doing the work in this our moment of time? Thank you. I'm just saying thank you to all of you.
Okay. I want to thank you, Greg. It's always fun to be with you. And Judy, thank you very much for sharing this wisdom with all of us. And I want to thank all of you as bearers of the light, and also, and most of all, the Immaculate Heart Community who have gathered us here today, and for the contribution that you are making to a world standing in need. We recognize it. And the fact that you are here, that you hosted us today, and for all the team that helped us put this together, Celina and Michelle especially. I think that having opportunities like this feeds our soul. And I don't know what was said to each one of us or the stirring within, but that's ours. That's our gift and our grace from today. So I want to thank all of you as we will move out into the world and create the community in the face of isolation today. And however we do it, to say thank you for the presence today and for the gift of the wisdom that the Spirit gave to each of us, and especially to someone here who is an immigrant seeking asylum in this country, and for her and her family. Please pray for them. They go to court in June. So thank you very much.
I love these two women, and I've known them for forever. And a homie ended an email with me the other morning, and he said, "Today I will surrender into the arms of God, then choose to be those arms." And I thought, that's pretty good. And so I think we have a right to our confidence that love never fails. I was on a podcast the other day, and the guy was kind of devil's advocate. I go, "No, people are going to call you naive, and because I said love never fails." And I said, well, if you look at your experience, you know that that's true. And it's okay to be confident that that's the truth. And if we proceed with confidence, which is very different from arrogance, you're confident that love will never fail, as long as we're all kind of doing it and engaged in it and just doing what we can in the most loving way, and to choose, to be those arms.
Thank you, Sister Suzanne Jabro, Father Greg, and Sister Judy. It's such an honor for me to be here in your presence. And I just thank you. I thank you for the love that you put forth every day. And I know that everybody here is starting off their weekend pretty darn nice after this. And I just want to add a little fun. The responsorial psalm. All you need is love. Da, 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 da. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So just to close out today, I want to thank our amazing panel. My heart is full and my to-do list is very long. It was incredible, and I know that you're all stirred with what you heard. So just a couple things. There's literature outside. Please become a friend of the heart. That's our volunteer program. You'll be engaged with hands-on actions that we do, and you'll also be part of our force as we reach out to other people to share the good news that we heard today. We have an event in Echo Park at St. Paul's on May 16th, and it's our Lunch and Learn. We do them monthly, and some of my friends here are there every month. And it will be hearing from Executive Director of CELA, which is a community building and food rescue organization and street outreach. And then you heard about the Rebel Hearts. I see a couple right here in the front row, on the second row. We're going to be screening that at the LA International Short Film Festival on July 19th in downtown LA at the Regal Theaters. So we'll screen the documentary that is award-winning, and then we'll have a panel with some of the Rebel Hearts. So please take a literature on your way out, sign up on our website, and please, we'll send out a link with information about all the things that you heard. Sorry, my back. That you heard about today, and I'm just so grateful to look out and see so many loving and supportive faces. Thank you very much, and have a great day.